Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Hopefully everyone has had a great day so far. Microphone check. Looks like everything's working correctly. Good, good. All right. Welcome, welcome. Hopefully everyone has had a great morning so far and going into the afternoon session now with Power Hour upon us, or at least the last, 30, 40 minutes of it or so. Looking to see if we can find some halfway decent movement one way or another. The big thing to note for today really is that we filled in those candle gap objectives early this morning by the time bar 6, bar 7 starts hitting. And that ended up being the top of the day. It's hard to see at the time, how much of an impact these levels can have. But in hindsight, now that we can go back a little bit, we can see earlier this morning the levels we were talking about in the live trade room. That was the top of the day. It hasn't come back. So kind of crazy. From there, it's just been sort of a range, mostly back and forth, new lift up to a high, down to a new low, big drive down to a new low. And then after the low hit, it was higher, low, higher, low, higher, low, failures all over the place, and now we're rolling higher. Seems like probability would dictate more movement to the upside, potentially looking for, a new high or back up towards the 74s to 80s. It's kind of what it looks like at the moment, at least. We have that rising support kind of grinding along with price here from the bottom. Trying to find the best fit for this thing though, and it's not the it's not the cleanest in the world. Let's try that one instead. So we're dealing with a little bit of a channel, kind of grinding our way higher, and the market's trying to lift up. Pretty weak on the lows. This could be the start of that rally going into the end of the day. Nice little washout dip or some kind of pullback for buyers to work off of. Bulls continuing to try to push higher. Got a nice little back and forth. I mean, there's a ton of wicks on the on the 500 tick. Crazy amount of wicks on the highs. Nice little push through the top. Would be nice to see a quick little pullback or some kind of flush back down to retest some of these wicks. Lots of support down here. It's just a matter of which one the market's going to actually want to stick to. Big objective, which they're running out of time for, but still got 40 minutes. Big objective for the daily traders are going to be looking to try to turn today into a bullish engulfing candle. We have that attempted move down through a new low, right? That previous day ending as an inside day. We break out underneath the low and then rotate all the way back up. It's a very bullish type of move, and that's what the buyers want to see. Whether or not they're going to be able to get that, I don't know, but they're running out of time, that's for sure. See if we can get a little more continuation to the upside. What are you trading? I am trading the micro NASDAQ. Depending on your broker or your charting platform, the symbol might be different, but for NinjaTrader, it's the MNQ, which is currently on the December contract. Pretty strong bullish continuation to the upside. Sellers still possibly getting squeezed. We have, I mean, there's a good chunk of bearish pressure here that just got shut down and now squeezing higher. Whew. How late do you trade? It depends on the day. If there's volatility, sometimes some of the best setups will happen at 3:30, 3:40. I mean, heck, sometimes the best setups will happen at 3 in the morning. So as far as how late do I trade, there's not really a time frame that's necessarily off the table. Specifically for like the live trade room in the morning, we open at 9 o'clock and then usually trade the morning session until about 11. And then I'll come back in the afternoon and see if anything's bumping around, and if there are things moving, then might find some opportunities. No, we trade the MES. Man, we trade the the NASDAQ's definitely my preferred one. That's the one that I focus the majority of my time on. But there are a few traders that do focus on the ES and all of that as well. The indexes are kind of where I keep my eyes on. But honestly, it's whatever's moving. You know, beforehand, a few years ago, would have been crude oil. But then... then crude oil went to negative $40 and I kind of lost faith in it, you know? So that's one of those things like, yeah, I don't know, $40,000 margin doesn't seem like it's a whole lot of fun. Do you just trade price action? Just found this channel. Yeah, so one of the big focuses that I operate on is the psychological backbone of what's going on, or what I jokingly call context. Context is king. It's always about the context. What I'm looking at is more so the reason behind why the market's moving. Regardless of whether or not the majority of volume comes from algos or high-frequency trading computers or, I mean, whatever. They're still programmed by humans. So they're still going to have a natural bias that's built into them. That's why they have to change them so often, because eventually the bias stops working and then they have to switch to a new one. So the reasoning behind why trades are happening, where people are getting in, where people are getting out, where their stops are potentially going to be, if they're getting squeezed, like right now, sellers are getting squeezed. A squeeze just being they're stuck and the market keeps going higher, not giving them a chance to get out. Along the way with these types of moves, when you start focusing on the context of what's going on and really kind of looking at the market like it's telling a story and saying, all right, well, you know, we had this nice drive to the downside, everything looks nice and strong, and then all of a sudden this just ripped their face off. This changes things, right? So something has changed here. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that one out, but we still want to look backward and think, okay, well, the sellers were short, likely from below that bear bar, maybe even short from below that little inside bear bar. So what happens when it starts coming back to their break-even points? What happens when their trades are completely invalidated, right? Well, you can see what happened. If they're short below the inside bar, and they were holding through all of this, and then this thing shows up, and they're like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, back the trade up a second. This was a good trade, and now I'm losing money. What? What's going to happen? They come back to break even, they get out. Right? There's a reason why it stopped right there. So that's more my approach, is looking at the market as though it's telling a story and understanding it like a language. And just like languages, you'll mess it up sometimes. Nobody's ever perfect, right? Especially with the markets. You'll read something wrong, or you'll say a word the wrong way, or whatever. But the goal is to understand the general idea of the story so you can follow along with, 60, 70% accuracy. As long as you understand the plot, right? Like right now, this move down, looking at it from looking at it from the perspective of what we were just talking about, sellers are stuck. What is this move more likely going to be then? When we start dipping back into where sellers may have positioned more, right? If they were short down here and they're trying to draw their average up, they're going to sell more below the next bear bar. That's a kind of a second sell. It's pretty gross, but it's kind of a failure. And we know that they're going to sell more there. And there's a bear bar, they'll sell there too. It doesn't mean it's a good signal, but algos don't care if it's a good signal. It doesn't matter, right? Just knowing where the entries will take place is what we have to pay attention to. And when the market comes back to those zones, it bounces because they're exiting a break-even. It starts getting to a point where they're no longer trying to make money on the trade. They're just trying to mitigate the damage. You ever traded micro corn? I haven't traded the micro corn, no. I've traded the corn futures and soybeans and all of the others, but I've never traded the micro. I do really like the agricultural markets. I always have. It's just, they're so seasonal. When they're moving well, they're fantastic. but man, when they go to sleep, it's over. Taking notes from the bonds. See you in 7 hours when we move 3 ticks. Market rotating back up. Nice little trap underneath the lows here that's kind of resetting it as well. A lot of the sellers will now have been given a chance to get out of break even. Whether they were selling early, selling in the middle, selling at the top, they've been offered a chance to at least mitigate the majority of the damage. So seeing this going back up to the highs, that opens up the door for more objectives. Still looking at some of the bigger targets from the 15-minute, I mean, man... It's just dead flat as far as volume goes. It looks like it's a clone of yesterday. So from a volume perspective, we're still in the same spot. The POC is pretty much in the same spot as it was yesterday, and there was a naked POC before that. We're in a balance. And now, with a failure off of the lows, chances are we're going to rotate back up and try to get above the highs. So longs right now are a little more favorable. That would be the preference. Pardon the kids playing in the background. The joys of trading from home. Typically, if you couldn't tell by the markets that I tend to watch, I'm a big fan of volatility. I like it when things are moving. So the micro NASDAQ, anything that's got some volatility to it, I'll pay attention to. Too much volatility can be a problem too. But are you live every day? I try to be when I'm able to. I mean, our live trade room is open every morning for members during the morning session at the Stock Exchange Open. In the afternoon, I try to get something going for at least 20-30 minutes to see if something's moving. But honestly, if the market's dead, then it's just a waste of time. Or if I've got meetings or other things that I've got to take care of. But if I can get a chance to get some time in on here, I definitely try to, yeah. And the one nice thing about 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock, that time frame is when a lot of volatility starts kicking in. Usually. He says as the ticks stop moving on the chart. Got a nice rotation back to the upside. I wouldn't necessarily mind seeing a little bit of a dip back towards the 35 quarters or so. If we can get a little bit of a flush back to the 35 quarters, or even a little bit lower, I don't necessarily mind buying into the pullback. The big thing that I'm looking for here is just a cycle to the upside. Ooh, big flush to the downside. A little bit of a washout. Building in a little bit more on the washout. So when the market's flushing like this, you have a choice. You either just hit the exits and call it good, saying that we're getting hit by some kind of volatility, or you keep your risk in check and you can scale along with it. Right now, I've kept the risk in check, and I mean, the risk has been very small so far. So there's not really a whole lot of concern yet, but I will be looking to jostle the position a little bit. Once it starts breaking down this aggressively, especially through here, we're probably going to get a pop, and this flush back is likely just a lot of sellers who are stuck from earlier that are looking for the rotation up. It's just a matter of where. Didn't get filled on the bid. Tried buying the bid on that 1475, and it left me in the dust. Jeez, oh Pete. All right, well, given how... All right, well, we've got some volatility, huh? See if we can get this to creep back up towards the 31 quarters. This move down will likely have taken traders who were long by surprise, but it's also nice because the sellers who were in earlier are getting out of break even, so it's creating this nice kind of inflection point. Big zone of interest if we can start forming another halfway decent bottom. Really, really nice pullback flush. Upside objectives are looking for, right now, up to the 48s, potentially, though, all the way up to 78.50 or a little bit further. I wouldn't necessarily mind seeing if the buyers can get a bit more juice to the upside. They might have upside targets in the 50s to 70s. I haven't added yet. I haven't seen a reason to add yet. We had that nice pop up, but now seeing it reject back down, a lot of times if the sellers do end up taking it, they're probably going to pressure lower. It doesn't make any sense to add risk right now. And if the buyers are going to take it, it's probably going to lift above the 31s relatively quickly. More towards the objectives at around the 40s, 50s. I mean, it really depends on where they want to go. Starting to break down into a major zone of interest. Really nice bull bar to add some conviction as well. Still looking at upside objectives at around as far as the 68s to 70s. You're long. Yeah, at the moment, I'm looking to get a continuation move to the upside, but I'm adjusting my position a little bit. I'm looking at this more from a swing perspective with the lower high, trying to get a deeper dip for buyers. But it's a matter of trying to get the right position point. So initially, I was looking to buy aggressively, but still had to keep the size a little bit small for this type of situation where it does flush a little bit farther down. So when I'm looking to adjust my position, effectively, when we start getting pops higher, even though it might not necessarily be in a profitable position yet, I'm looking to mitigate a little bit of the risk by exiting generally above where I want my average to be. And while the market is hovering in the zone of interest, which right now, the zone of interest for me on the long perspective is hovering inside of here, that's kind of where I want to try to get my average. Average is still a little bit high. Let's see if I can draw it down just a bit more. I don't want to add too much risk. Nice potential 3 press low. I would like to see if we can get a little bit of a flush down to the 703s before I look to add too much of anything. If the market does want to start rallying above the 16s, 17s, that's fine. Still looking for objectives more so ending in the 70s. I'm going to reduce a little bit of risk on that flush just in the event that it wants to break a bit lower. If it still wants to run higher, that's fine, but it's not worth risking it with that kind of failure on the top. Do you trade full time? Yeah, well, I mean, I run SSFTG and everything else too, but I mean, it's more than just trading, yeah. I'd like to see if I can pick up a few down here. Man, I got skipped on every bid there. Adding a little bit more on this dip lower. Again, still trying to adjust position sizing a little bit to prevent too much risk. And all the while trying to draw my average down. I'm going to reduce a little bit more. So my average is starting to get to the point where I want it now, but they're starting to break through that area with a little bit more conviction, so we might have to modify a little bit. What kind of capital should you start with? It depends on what you're looking to do. If you're looking to scalp, like right now, I'm more swing building into positions because of the time of day. It's a little bit harder to get scalps going unless the volatility is really high, which it's starting to get there, maybe. Usually when there's about, in the next 5 to 10 minutes, that's when you see things pick up a bit. But it depends on what you're looking to do, really, more than anything else. Could you get away with starting a trading account with $1,000? Sure. Are you going to be able to trade the full-size mini markets and survive? Probably not. So, I mean, there is a little bit of needing to be realistic too. When you're looking at any type of trading that revolves around minis, especially right now with this kind of volatility. I mean, if you're trading, I think that's a good number, Chuck. I think if you're trading with less than like 10K, at least, especially if you're looking at the minis, micros you can modify a little bit, but from the minis, it's like I wouldn't want to go much less than that. Beyond that, trading the micros, that's where you can get away with trading some of the smaller stuff, but you're not going to be trading it like with this, building into positions and averaging in, averaging out. You're not going to be approaching it that way. The approach is going to be drastically different, where you're going to be looking for more of a solid entry, solid exit. So as an example, like the 5-minute RTH for the long here, if you were taking this long with one contract in mind and not using any type of building in, then you'd be buying into this pullback, and it would have been a stop out. When we were talking about it breaking lower, that's the exit. So you're either building in, looking for a longer term swing, or you just take the loss. And the loss at the time when we were first talking about it, I think was like, I don't know, $70 or $80. So if you're sitting on top of an $80 loss that fits your account range, then you're fine. And one of the easiest ways to figure that out, take the, I'll just say 100 to make life easy. So 100, and let's say I never want to risk more than 5%. So the account size on that trade, minimum, should be 2,000. Now, would I recommend 2,000 for the kind of no. But just, you know, so we're on the same page, mathematics versus, you know, realism. I took 3 1K accounts to 5K. The MES, and then withdrew for pills and blew up my last 1K. Gotcha. Yeah, and, you know, one of the biggest things when you're looking at that type of move, like right now as an example, right? If you were trading this in the minis, your emotional state would be, you'd be in a disaster zone. On micros, it's very easy to maintain a level head. It's, you know, I mean, the difference of thousands versus hundreds, you know. So being able to have that flexibility makes an incredible difference just from a psychological perspective. I think the micros are incredible. I wish the micros would have been around for a lot longer than they have been, but now they've got the micro options and all the other stuff too. Man. So just sort of chipping away at it a little bit, piece by piece. I want to eventually have my position size at around 10 to try to hold, but it keeps sliding lower. We're going to have to mitigate and exit soon here. I'm going to reduce a little bit more just to draw my average down, see if we can get a pop back up. How much drawdown will you take before you cut a trade? So you'll notice one thing that I'm doing along the way, I'm entering a little and then exiting a little and then entering a little and then exiting a little. And when it pops, exiting a little bit more and then entering a little. I'm always trying to keep my risk. Typically, I don't like having to go more than like 200 or 300. Sometimes it will on occasion. But usually when it's above that, that's when it's time to start cutting. So I'm always trying to keep my risk under that if preferable. And if that means that I have to adjust, that's fine. The important part is that the context of the trade, the reason for the trade is still realistic, right? It still makes sense. Because if the reason for the trade is no longer there, then you shouldn't be in the trade anymore. If there's no reason for a trade, then why you know what I mean? Why be in one? So as long as the context is still good on the trade, I'm still willing to build in and draw my average down to a point where I can hold on for the larger rally up. Right now, my upside objectives, I'm looking at upside objectives right now back towards the 733 to 750. So given my risk reward to where we are now, if it starts breaking down below the open and it starts getting much below 50, then I'm not going to want to hang on to it much longer. So if it starts breaking down, you know, way down there, my positioning is going to change a little bit. I'm going to get a little bit more aggressive and then drop a few more when it pops up, and a little bit more aggressive and then drop a few when it pops up. The mentality changes. So yeah, and the micros have a ton of volume, especially now. See if you can get a little bit more of a bounce back up again. Still fighting over that settlement price and getting a little bit later in the day. We're starting to get to that last 10 minutes. This is when things get really fun. Nice little jump to the upside. See if we can get a continuation move going. Well, thanks, Chuck. I appreciate it. Running out of time for the afternoon session. Once we start getting closer to 4 o'clock, then we're going to have to start holding into the overnight. So if that's the case, if you're the type of trader who doesn't want to hold into the overnight, then you've got the chance to just exit. The loss is relatively small. It's like $50 right now, on top of the others. So all in all, it'd be like 200-ish. Or still, for me personally, I am still very much on the long side and looking for a valid bounce back up, especially since they really have no conviction to the downside or the upside from yesterday. It's just a big wick. I'm looking at fading the low and seeing it return back up to the mean into tonight. The mean being back up towards the 700s again. Do you ever trade the open, or do you wait for 10 or 15 minutes after? Honestly, I think if you have traded for less than like a year, you shouldn't trade the open. The open is, man, when the open is good, it's fantastic, right? It's hard to beat. And when the open is bad, it rips your face off and laughs at you while it's doing it. I mean, it's one of the most visceral times you can get your hands on in the markets. It can be incredible, but eesh. So, I mean, yes, I will. More generally, if I have a position open going into the open, then I'll hold on and see if I can get a little more out of it. But you're also risking giving the entire thing back in milliseconds. So you got to really understand your risk if you're going to be trading around the open. And it does end up being fake out central. Yeah, that's definitely true. Nice transitional high. Looking for upside objectives, at least into the 700s first, just to see if the buyers can recoup some of this move. But then beyond the 700s, again, looking to hold on for the overnight going into tomorrow. I would really love to try to stay in long on this going into tomorrow to see if we can get a bounce back up above 750s. We'll have to wait and see, but I do have a meeting that I've got to make it to in the next couple minutes, so I'm going to have to duck out a little bit earlier than I wanted to. Right now, it's looking pretty good, though. I've gotten my position average to around where I want it to be. The market slid a little bit farther, but mitigated risk along the way. Now we've got our positions in. I'm just waiting for a continuation back to the upside. So that's going to do it. Sorry to cut it short, but, you know, work calls, so... Enjoy. Hopefully you guys had a fantastic trading day, and I will see you all hopefully tomorrow. Otherwise, the next time I'm able to jump on YouTube. And for you members, I will see you tomorrow morning, all right? Have a good one. We'll talk to y'all later. Thanks.